Like mini set list dilemma, I haven't really thought this through. I'll tell you what I'll do, because I've never done this one. I'm in a band called Jazz Riot. I don't know how many of you know Jazz Riot. And basically it's this stuff, but with a guy playing amazing jazz funk guitar behind it. And I've never done a solo or spoken word version of this next one. This next one, you know, it may look like I'm on stage by myself and with Jazz Riot, just two of us, but there are actually 3 members of this band, and the 3rd member is sitting... He was here a second ago.
Just next to you.
So where's he gone? Where's Turner? Is he away? We've got this tour manager who's a fucking space cadet and a lovely human being, but I've got to manage him. I've got to go, right, we're leaving at this time, so we'll get there, and he's brilliant. This one's called Dan, driving man with a cunning plan. There's loads of time, we'll be okay, we'll pick some smoke up on the way. Dan, my next door neighbour in Ovingham. We live in shacks with dogs and hens and lasses who now wear sexy men. Dan, he stood by me when I got banned. That time our village cast me out for cracking jokes about the Scouts. Dan, his tour bus is a Renault Megane. The interior smells like someone died and the windows fucked on the passenger side. Dan, from A to B he is our man. He drives to shows like a maniac, and when he gets there he smokes tack. Dan, he gets paid in t-shirts, spliffs and cans. But he knows he scored the full-time gig when Jazz Riot inevitably get dead big. Dan, he's a member of this band. He's a driver, he's a minder, he's a Raji, he's a Gurner. Dan, Daniel fucking Turner. Thank you.